Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Pettitt, and who do I have the privilege of interviewing today?
Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Milner. I am an assistant professor at East Tennessee State University. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Virginia, soon to be licensed in Tennessee as well.
Woo!
And I'm thrilled to be here.
Yay. Well, thank you very much. Um, Part of these interviews have mostly been friends or colleagues of mine, and I get really excited when I get to meet a new person. So we don't have a prior friendship. This is just the beginning. So thank you very much
Yes.
for being here.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So typically I'm starting off with these two big concepts that are kind of rolling around my brain to see how they land on you. There's no wrong answer. So the first one is the concept of diversity dividend. So in thinking about diversity dividend, usually this comes up thinking about the bottom line. I'm using air quotes. So what does diversity dividend mean to you, thinking about investment, action, and results?
Mm. So when you ask the question, I immediately think about it in the context of um, getting more training, I guess, or more education or more experience, knowledge, self-awareness. So if I'm putting it in the frame of counseling, and our counseling components would be knowledge, skills, awareness, that's self and other awareness, and then action, which falls into advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of like a dividend or a payout, I guess if I were thinking about personally, I think it helps to make me, I'll just speak for me, me a more empathic, compassionate, better human, and better able to. So a lot people have to do a lot of, particularly people who have marginalized identities, have to do a lot of code switching, and it helps me to understand better how they might be code switching with me, and helps me to hopefully figure out how I can code switch too, to adapt to a situation that's culturally different from my home culture. And in terms of professionally, I think all of that also helps with globalization and with just local to global inclusive environments. It helps improve workplace. It helps improve physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being in our workplaces. That can pay out in dividends in terms of employee productivity and health and happiness. And so I think just personally and professionally, that's what I think just about that. There's only things to gain, that there's maybe some painful parts of growth. Growth can be really painful and challenging, and yet we have so much to gain in the long term from it. I don't know if that at all answered what you were getting at, but I know you said there were no wrong answers. So
no wrong answers, but it also transitions nicely to the next big idea question, which is the concept of other duties assigned. And what I liked about what you said is how work in your personal life may also bleed over to your professional life, but your professional development also bleeds over into your personal life, which sometimes shows up as other duties assigned. What does that land on you like?
So you're talking about the other duties as assigned, and that can be wide open to personal or professional.
Yeah. Just the concept of asterisks, other duties assigned.
Yeah. Just to follow with the thought that you offered, that maybe, I know for me in counseling, there's a large overlap in the Venn diagram. I love a good Venn diagram. And there's a large overlap in terms of who I am as a person and who I am as a counselor, and bringing that into the counseling room. And there might be a less of an overlap in other professions. And yet, as you said, I mean, as particularly in our culture here in the United States, there's such a high demand of what is expected of us in the workplace, and what's being kind of like, a lot of places are going to wring out whatever they can from us. And if we're spending as much, if not more, time with our colleagues in the office than we are with our family, our friends, our pets, then definitely what's happening at work and what's happening at home, those are gonna impact. And maybe there are times when we're definitely unable to leave certain things at home or leave certain things at work. And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of other duties as assigned, there's going to be things that pop up all throughout life that we have to navigate challenges. I mean, we were just talking before we were recording about how I unexpectedly now have my mother with me who's very ill, and so there's always going to be other duties as assigned that we have to figure out how to navigate. And in terms of, I think what might come up later is this piece of mindfulness is figuring out how to do this kind of stuff with self-compassion along the way, where we can be gentle with ourselves and compassionate with ourselves. And certainly as we're engaging in any type of personal growth that has to do with maybe becoming more inclusive in our ways of being, I think compassion with ourselves is definitely needed.
Well, what I liked about our conversations prior to this interview is your dissertation research is on that mindfulness or mindfulness strategies, but the Venn diagram of mindfulness strategies working towards intercultural development that also are rooted in feminism and multiculturalism. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that simultaneity or that Venn diagram in your own work, in your approach to doing diversity work?
Sure. So I definitely think about the components of brain-based learning. And some of the major components of brain-based learning is safety, having safety, and then tying information to emotion and meaning. So if we wanted to bypass our short-term memory and get into our long-term memory, we need to tie those things to both emotion and to meaning. And also we can't do that. Like that can really get us, if we're feeling, we have emotions stirred up, and if some of those emotions that are coming up are guilt, shame, anger, judgment, those types of things, that can, especially if we're in a situation where you have other colleagues around and you're not used to feeling these things with them, or you're not used to talking about these things, or you have your boss in the room and then your supervisees and there's power dynamics, that might not feel like a safe environment. And that's when our brain is going to go offline. So if we get too anxious, if we're not feeling safe, then we're not going to be able to fully integrate what we're learning, really take time to think about it, let it sink in. And so there's a lot of things that we have to consider in terms of if we're just going into a room and trying to do a blanket thing, there's so much happening in those group dynamics and for each person individually. So how can we maximize a safe learning environment and then tying this information into emotion and meaning? And so that's where I think there's a lot of elements. If we draw from elements of mindfulness, these basic mindfulness strategies, it can help mitigate some of those things that might come up, some of these emotions that don't feel as safe, and help to get into the things that we're experiencing in our body, and again, hope to maximize safety and maximize connectedness to emotion and meaning. And so in terms like that, then there's the broader, like, other pedagogical things that you had asked about, but that's kind of like the foundational starting point. That anywhere going in, that I think that needs to be a starting point, is establishing some safety in the room. And then thinking about, okay, what are the strategies that I'm going to bring in to tie things to emotion and meaning? And that's where I think about bringing in things like, if we're looking at multicultural things, like if we take critical race theory, how do I bring in counter stories? And counter stories that will challenge people, and also in a way that it's not going to shut people down. And so some of this also, like, I really think about things developmentally. We were talking about scaffolding very briefly too. And in terms of scaffolding learning, and part of what mindfulness, the piece about mindfulness that I draw into this, is being able to meet learners where they are, because there are going to be people in a room that also have had a variety of different life experiences that are bringing different knowledge into the room, different levels of self and other awareness. And again, a one blanket training isn't necessarily going to speak. It might be too far ahead of where this person is and then too far behind of this other person. And so neither of them really feel like they're able to get what they need out of it. And so incorporating some of this, some of the mindfulness strategies can also help to meet learners where they are and help facilitate some learning developmentally and scaffolding that learning for them.
Yeah, what I love about the idea of the concept of scaffolding learning, meeting people where they're at, is that it also allows you to also be where you are at and
Yes.
not someplace else, right? Which
Yes.
leads to one of my favorite questions. Are you prepared for my favorite questions?
I hope so.
Yeah. So, what is something you've changed your mind about lately?
Something I changed my mind about lately, very recently, and this is one of those that now that I've changed my mind about it, I grimace and I have a thing like this where I'm like, why didn't I change my mind about this before? And that is that when I now, when I start my classes, so here on campus, I used to do, everyone goes around and they say their name, whatever name they go by. And then I'll give them a prompt based on the class that kind of fits with the class. And now I do names and pronouns. And
Mhm.
so I'll say, everybody say name, your pronouns, and then whatever the prompt is for the class. And I had some internal debate and some kind of other debate around about whether or not how that fits for people who maybe aren't ready to share where they are with their pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really, really helpful, wonderful conversation with one of my students, that the shift was that they're going to be people, we use pronouns for others all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in allowing people to decide in the moment in that classroom their pronouns, even if it's not ultimately the pronouns that fit for them in the long term, they get to make the choice and have some agency, rather than it just being pronouns just being used and it not fitting for them.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I recently changed my mind about, and I'm really glad that I did, and have gotten, and I know that I've already heard back from students about how much that's made a difference for them. So
When you also used a great example, when I teach about pronouns, those of us that are cisgender or that people don't question which pronouns to use in reference to us that align with our identity, when asked to do that, sometimes feels like a grammar pop quiz, right? Because you're like, oh gosh, what's a pronoun, right? So creating the space to do that for those of us that this is not actually a challenge doesn't cost us anything. We just have to remember what grammar is. And then they, them are often used as gender neutral pronouns. And in the example you were saying is a student said how much they appreciated it. And then you were able to say that how it contributed to their interaction in class. And we use they, them as singular pronouns all the time. But when asked to do it, sometimes we get grammarist, right? And like, oh, they, them is a plural word. That doesn't make any sense. And like, that's not true. We use it singularly all the time. And you should be able to respect and validate what people say they use, right? So that's actually the first time gender neutral pronouns have come up. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. Yeah, and one other, real quick, one other thing I'll say about, well, two other things is I have a fantastic podcast. I love using podcasts in the classroom, and I have one that actually challenges that use of grammarist, and certainly the way all the isms show up in our language, and remembering that our language is constantly changing, evolving thing. And so rather than having resistance to that recognizing that language, of course, is always evolving and being shaped and it's constructed. And the other thing is that I also model it. So the first thing I'll do is I'll say my name, my pronouns, and then my response to the prompt. So that, again, as part of being, hopefully creating some egalitarianism in the space and modeling what it is that I'm asking of people, that it's appropriate for me to start out with my pronouns.
That's great. And we'll share the link to this podcast in the show notes when the interview goes out. That'd be great.
Sure.
Okay, next favorite question. What do you absolutely know?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so I love this because, again, you'd alluded to constructivist thought. And so the idea of constructivist thought is that we're always co-constructing knowledge and meaning. And so knowledge and meaning is always evolving. It's always becoming something new. Even when we look at our human memory, our memory is actually really lousy. And the way our neurons fire and our memory works is that we're always reconstructing our memories. And so even though we have particular firm memories, the ways that we come back to and remember those changes over time often. So philosophically, I would like to say, what do I absolutely know? is very little. I know that I have so much love for particular people in my life. That is solid. I know that right now in this moment, I think there are lots of things that I could say that I know, and that I also know that in another moment, that knowledge might change and shift. So maybe
That's the pairing of my favorite questions, right? Is what have you changed your mind about, and what do you absolutely know? I think in order to absolutely know something, you have to constantly question it. And if you constantly question it, you might land on it and believe in it and be able to explain it to other people, or you might change your mind. Okay, so now we have arrived at lightning round.
Okay.
So the lightning round is you picked 3 random numbers from my icebreaker cards. So 12, 3, and 38. So super lightning round. You can't think about it very fast, Smarty McSmarty pants. So here we go. Number 12 is you have easy, intermediate, or deep. This is an easy one. If you were able to pick the one thing that always makes you smile, what would it be?
The one thing that always makes me smile. Oh gosh, it's supposed to be an easy one. I would say right now, the scenery here in the mountains and just being outside in nature, absorbing all that goodness.
Excellent. Excellent. See, you're doing great. Okay, number 3, also easy. What person, living or dead, would you most like to go to lunch with, and what would you talk about?
See, this isn't an easy question for me, because this is kind of like a favorites question, and I'm lousy at favorites questions.
How about a person? It doesn't have to be the person, but a person.
I'd have to think really hard about, this might get me a little teary-eyed. I'd have to think really hard about the person that I'd like to go to lunch with, to have like a good up here kind of conversation, stimulating learning things, knowledge. But here, right now, the person who I'd go to lunch with is my Mima, who is not here. She's deceased, and so that would be my heart answer. Would be to have a lunch with her, and even as I'm saying that, I can feel that come up in my eyes and my chest.
Oh, that's wonderful. When I was asked like a Facebook thing recently, is 3 people to go to a meal with that are alive. And I instantly came up with 2 people from academics that I think would disagree with each other and support each other in a way that would be wonderful and lovely. And it was Karl Marx and W.E.B. Du Bois. Yeah. So then I was like, okay, I get a third person. So I was picturing the 3 of us sitting at a table, and who would be the third person. And I wanted someone who would learn and glean from the conversation and benefit from it as much, but also stir it up to whole new levels. I know that this may sound really cheesy, but I picked my partner. And out of all the times I've ever done this, I've never picked somebody like, oh yeah. But I wouldn't want to go to dinner with Marx and Du Bois and then come home and be like, guess what I did today? Like, yeah. But it's not just the obligation of it, is that I would love where the conversation would go.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like so, there's something about that seems so affirming and reassuring in like your partnership and wanting to share that. Yeah.
And I will admit that like intellectually, I was surprised that it was just so obvious. When I pictured me, Marx, W.B. Du Bois, well, of course, Lauren would be there. Like, wow, that's so great. Okay. Lightning round, and I'm talking. That's not good. Okay, number 38. This one is actually a deep question.
Okay.
Buckle up. What are 3 values or beliefs you hold highest?
3 values or beliefs I hold highest. Empathy, integrity, and okay, narrow this down. 3 values and beliefs I hold highest. So, gosh, I think about compassion? Is compassion too close to empathy?
It's your game. You get to do whatever you want.
Those are the 3 that are, if we're just in a lightning round, those are the 3 that are coming to me right now.
Based on those answers, I think we are going to be friends for a very long time. So thank you very much for being with us today. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Work phone, 423-439-7321. And then So I do have Empathia Consulting is my official, I would say, I guess, for consulting stuff. And that one, do I need to spell that out for you?
We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
and so there's an email address for that as well.
great. So Empathia Consulting would be the main location, and I hope people reach out to you. Thank you so much for spending time. I really, really appreciate it, and I look forward to getting to know you better.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Jessica.